Member for Fong Lim.
Yes, Madam Speaker. I table the Legal and Constitutional Affairs Committee report, Voluntary Assisted Dying in the Northern Territory, first interim report and associated minutes of proceedings. Voluntary assisted dying is a complex issue that raises difficult and challenging questions for individuals, groups and society as a whole. What's clear, though, is that it remains an unresolved subject matter in the Northern Territory and a matter of significant interest for Territorians. With that in mind, the Legal and Constitutional Affairs Committee is pleased to have the opportunity to progress resolution of the issue in our polity. I am pleased, as Chair of the Committee, to present this first interim report on VAD in the Northern Territory to the Legislative Assembly and to the public at large, as testament to the work undertaken to date by the Committee to address the VAD inquiry terms of reference provided to us by the Attorney-General. The Committee has been working cooperatively and constructively, ably assisted by the Secretariat to produce this document and ancillary materials in a timely fashion. We remain committed to engaging with the issues at hand systematically and fairly and communicating our work regularly to keep Territorians abreast of our progress. We trust the report will be of assistance to interested parties. Madam Speaker, I move that the report be noted.
Tanzil Rahman is the member for Fong Lim and chair of the Legal and Constitutional Affairs Committee. Tanzil, welcome to ABC Radio Darwin. I did put this question to the Chief Minister. When the very first interview that we had after she came into power and the CLP had won, the Chief Minister said it is not a priority of the CLP government to look at voluntary assisted dying, and added she didn't think a majority of Territorians supported the idea. That is despite the fact that the independent government report was handed down last August, finding exactly opposite that. Why are you running another report now, given the information that we've got?
Well, good morning, Adam. Thanks very much for having me on this morning.
I'll just get you to come a bit closer to the microphone.
Absolutely. So I'm sorry about that. I'm the chair of the Legal and Constitutional Affairs Committee. Parliamentary committees don't get to generate their own work. They respond to matters that are referred to us. So the Attorney-General has made a determination that an inquiry should be launched into the 2024 report on specific terms of reference. And ultimately, at the end of that process, if we think that there is a case for legislation to be made in respect of voluntary assisted dying, for us to provide some drafting instructions to move the issue forward. So it's not for me to determine whether we should be doing this, but how we do it and how we do it well.
One of the criticisms that the Chief Minister levelled at the previous report into voluntary assisted dying was that it just went up the spine of the Northern Territory. It hadn't spoken to people to the east or the west of the Stewart Highway. How will you be looking at speaking to more Territorians about this issue?
Well, with careful planning is the first thing. So the terms of reference that we've been provided are fairly broad and provide us with a lot of scope to be able to conduct a meaningful inquiry within a time-limited period of time. And in essence, we've been asked to, 1, prepare a consultation paper, 2, consult with communities, particularly those that are out in remote areas, and then 3, to evaluate VAD models, 4, to identify any specific NT challenges, and then 5, if necessary, to recommend a legislative framework going forward. So what the Legal and Constitutional Affairs Committee has done now to date is start thinking sensibly about, within that time period, how we can cover the most ground to consult in those remote areas. And so that is the process that we are currently engaged in. We have met a couple of times already, and we have communicated with a lot of the key administrative stakeholders in remote areas to try and get them to help us design an inquiry that allows us to get off the Stewart Highway.
The former report was co-chaired by Senior Counsel Duncan McConnell and the former Administrator of the Northern Territory, Vicky O'Halloran. And Duncan McConnell said in the survey they had the highest feedback they had ever received. That report obviously looked at different legislation across the country. Why spend time looking at that when that work has already been done? It sounds like you're doing something again that's already been done.
Well, not exactly. That, first of all, let me say that's a very exhaustive report that was conducted by those co-chairs. And because it's such a serious body of work, they are the first people that I wrote to on behalf of the Legal and Constitutional Affairs Committee to ask them to come and advise us at our next meeting about the scope of their inquiry, how they designed it, and to help us be guided in the right direction as well. So those are two of the very critical stakeholders in that area. We're not re-examining chapter and verse everything that has been done for the last 30 years. What this is doing is a final sweep of consultations, given the seriousness and gravity of the issue, in a range of places that haven't been covered as exhaustively. So, our focus...
But how many people are we talking about here?
Well, I think probably quite a few. So, I mean, as it stands at the moment, as you will well know, this is a congested time of year with a lot of activity throughout the Northern Territory. The next couple of weeks will be taken over by budget estimates, and any public servant in this town, which is a lot of them, will know that the town stops to deal with that. And then during July, we all know there's an awful lot of dry season activity, the show circuits, all that kind of thing. So what we're doing at the moment is all of the sort of background work in producing a consultation paper, making sure that it's got the right parameters, making sure it's accessible in languages that are appropriate, and then that will be put out, and then we'll invite submissions, and then we will in August, pretty much through the entire of August, be on the road collecting testimony and feedback from people out in remote areas. Now, exactly where we're going and exactly what that schedule will be is something that we're working through very carefully so that we can cover the maximum possible ground without actually going over old ground.
I've just got a text here at Tanzil. The CLP of the Chief are out of touch with the Northern Territorians. VAD should be available to the Northern Territory population. It's not like they have to reinvent the wheel. That sentiment, I would feel, is in a lot of the community.
And I think it's a reasonable sentiment. I mean, it's a sentiment that's reasonable because this issue hasn't really progressed in the Northern Territory meaningfully for 30 years, right? Marshall Perrin brought a law to the Parliament as a private member 30 years ago. And since that time, no government, CLP or Labor for that matter, has sought fit to legislate in this area, nor has any private member sought fit to bring a bill back to the Parliament. And so what I'm doing now is trying to advance the issue on behalf of the Legal and Constitutional Affairs Committee at the behest of the Attorney General. And so what I think Territorians deserve is resolution in relation to this issue. Now, whether or not there is broad brush support for this or not will be tested by individual people over time now. And I suspect you'll find that there is a lot of community sentiment in support of this, but there are also people that have concerns, and that, it's worth hearing those out as well. But I will say that I think it's unique in our terms of reference that we're being asked to consider drafting instructions for model legislation. That's not something that happens regularly in parliamentary inquiries. And so that's an indication, I think, that the government recognises that it may be time for us to think about legislating in this space.
What's the timeline, though, for that? Just very briefly, this is what Steve-O had to say.
I don't want to be a burden. I don't want to make a mess. And I don't want to make a fuss. I just want a quick and clean end.
Yeah, a clean end. In 10 seconds or less, what's the time frame here?
Well, we've been asked to report back in September. It's a tight time frame to look at a lot of stuff, and we'll be doing our very best to stay in that time frame.
Tanzil Rahman, member for Fong, thank you so much.
Now, joining me in the studio is the committee chair, Tanzil Rahman. Good morning to you, Tanzil.
Good morning, Katie.
Good to have you in the studio. Good to meet you in person.
Finally, yes. I'm pleased to have met with you finally as well in person.
No, it's really good to see you. Now, tell me, what is the scope of the inquiry?
The scope of the inquiry that we were provided by the Attorney General is essentially fivefold. It's 1, to prepare a consultation paper, 2, to consult with communities, particularly those out in remote areas, 3, to evaluate VAD models and safeguards, 4, to identify any challenges that are NT-specific, and then 5, if appropriate, to provide drafting instructions for model legislation.
Now, in terms of the consultation and heading out to remote communities, I mean, we have got so many wonderful remote communities around the Northern Territory. How are you going to get out to all of those? How are you going to consult as many people as possible?
Well, with careful planning. That's the first thing. We have a time-limited inquiry. We've been asked to come back and report back to the Attorney General at the end of September. As you know, this is a very congested time of year with a lot of things happening. Budget estimates will take over the next few weeks at Parliament, and then the dry season in July, there's lots of activity, as you know, as well. So what we're doing is using this time to get all the preparatory work done in the background so that essentially we'll be on the road for the best part of August, trying to do consultations in as many places as we can that are have not really seen consultations done on the ground in the past. So that will mean necessarily going out to remote areas. We obviously can't go everywhere, but what we'll be trying to do is go to, if you like, hub locations and then focus on spokes around them and try and cover as much ground as we can reasonably within that time frame.
And is that why the different land councils are really the first that you're going to be speaking with in terms of, getting this all underway?
That's exactly right. So I think what's important to understand here, first off, is that this issue is now in the hands of a parliamentary committee that's been assigned the task. There are 5 of us on the committee, 3 from the CLP, 1 from Labor, 1 Green, and we are all trying to work cooperatively together to make sure that we depoliticise the issue and try and get a result for Territorians on this, because frankly there's been no action or traction in this area in the best part of 25 years. And so what we are looking to do is, work together essentially to make sure that we've got the right plans in place.
I know you said then that, there hasn't been any action in this space, but, we first off, I suppose, we were the first many, many years ago to actually implement voluntary assisted dying legislation in the Northern Territory. Is any of that work that was done by Marshall Perrin being looked at and being utilised? Sure.
I mean, this inquiry is not in place to replace everything that's happened in the last 30 years. It's to provide a final sweep of supplementary information. Now, if you just remember the quick chronology, Marshall Perrin's Private Members Bill was done in 1995. Kevin Andrews' Private Members Bill, which overturned that essentially by the federal parliament, was done in 1997. And then nothing happened essentially for 22 years, or could happen, until the Act was passed in Parliament in 2022 to allow us to legislate in this space again. Now, since that time, neither major party or any individual has sought fit to put any legislation in the House. And so now we've got the opportunity to progress this as a bipartisan committee.
Tanzil, this is a topic that for a lot of Territorians, and I understand that there are some who will be opposed to voluntary assisted dying for various reasons, potentially religious reasons. I know that, I feel pretty passionately that I think that it is something that you should have the right to make that decision yourself, particularly, those that are going through terminal illness and have been sick for a very long time and potentially suffering for a very long time. And I also know that, our palliative care teams across the Northern Territory are absolutely incredible. There is no other way to put it. Anybody that's gone through palliative care or seen those doctors, nurses, staff in action here in the NT would attest in exactly the same way that I can, having seen my dad go through it. But I do just feel as though we are again sort of dragging our heels. I know there'll be other people that are thinking that, listening this morning. What's your message to anybody that is feeling like that, that's listening and going, why are we going through another consultation process?
Well, a couple of things to say there. First of all, even though every other state and territory does have legislation about this, they haven't had it for 30 years. Everyone's had it for the best part of the last 3 or 4 years. It's all pretty recent everywhere. It is true that we are now the last place in Australia that doesn't have legislation in this space. And so I think there is a desire to want to provide a legislative solution in this space, whatever that might look like. Regarding support for it, well, every MLA will have to test their own electorate to find out what sort of mood that people have for legislation in this space. And so I can't speak to any other electorate, but I know in my own electorate of Fong Lim, there are lots of people who contact me saying, we'd really like you to do something on the issue of VAT. Having said that, there is the odd person as well who has concerns, and you need to hear all of that out. So it's not that we're 30 years behind the rest of the country. We're probably a couple of years behind the last states and territories that legislated in the space only a couple of years ago.
Yeah, look, I agree with you. Like I said, even on our text line at different times, we do have people contact us saying, Katie, I don't agree with voluntary assisted dying for whatever reason. And I respect that, absolutely respect the fact that everybody's got different opinions. Now, in terms of, invite the people that have been invited to brief the committee next month, I touched on that a moment ago in terms of the different land councils, but who else?
Sorry, I didn't answer that question very well. The reason that we've approached these people in the first instance is because we've been specifically tasked to go out to remote areas. And you don't want to go out to remote areas without being invited and without working with the people who work out there all the time. Yeah. And so that's why in the first instance, on the 7th of July, when we have our next formal meeting, we've asked the chairs of the last inquiry to come and brief us to help guide us, as well as the CEO of AMSANT, which is the peak body in that space, as well as the land councils. And that's just a starting place to check in with administrative stakeholders stakeholders that are key, if you like. After that, there will, of course, be an open process for people to be able to write written submissions and or come and present themselves at public hearings.
Tanzil, in terms of those that were on the the former body or the former working group committee, I think. Yes, that's right. That's the word I'm looking for. Those that were on the expert panel, are they pretty positive about this step, or how are they feeling? Because I know I've spoken to some of those, at least one of those committee members who's concerned about how long this is all taking.
My engagement with them has been minimal, to be very frank.
Okay.
So far, it's been a case of writing, doing everything by the book, if you like, on behalf of our committee, to write to the former administrator, 𝙍𝙀𝙈𝙀𝙼𝙍 and to Duncan McConnell SC, to essentially ask them to brief us first as subject matter experts who oversaw the last inquiry. So it's not that I've gone out and litmus tested what everybody has to say about it, because the truth is, as soon as this was announced, I was flooded with inquiries from all over the place of people who know me personally or might be in my electorate saying, hey, I want to tell you what I think. And my answer to everyone is the same. Thank you for your thoughts, and send it on to the committee when submissions open. And that's what we have to do. My job here is not to,
get caught up.
No, it's to facilitate the process in a fair and impartial way, and to make sure that we essentially design the project well. It's a research design project at this stage, and then it becomes about executing it, and then about putting it together.
How are you feeling about, this is such an important piece of legislation. It is something that a lot, like we've touched on, a lot of people feel really passionately about or quite concerned with. I mean, how are you sort of personally feeling about this now being the task that is, at your hands to get underway and to make happen?
Well, Katie, I'll give you a little scoop. I'm pretty excited, actually, because not for nothing, but the very first piece of research work I ever did, albeit as a kid, was a research report about euthanasia, voluntary euthanasia in the Northern Territory, and whether people who are terminally ill should have access to it. Now, that was work I did as a kid, but I've always had an interest in this area. I think it's a really important area, and 30 years ago when I did that work, I ultimately concluded that this was an issue that Australia should probably start grappling with sooner rather than later. 30 years later, here we still are. So to have the opportunity to work collaboratively with my parliamentary peers and try and bring some resolution to this issue finally for Territorians is a real honour.
Isn't that interesting for you? That's like a real full circle moment, Tanzil.
I really didn't think it was, thank goodness for the fact that my dad doesn't throw anything out of the house. We managed to find that report.
Oh, you found it?
And in the interest of disclosure, I should probably put it on my website soon so that people can have a look if they want to see where my conflict lies. Oh, look, I mean, it's as good as a research report for a 14-year-old is going to be, I imagine. But, I designed surveys, and I spoke to doctors and religious leaders and, that sort of thing, and ultimately wrote a big report up saying that, we should probably think about doing something in the euthanasia space. Anyway. As I said, I wouldn't want, I say that slightly in jest, but also slightly in seriousness, because it is a great opportunity to bring to resolution something that hasn't been dealt with for a long time. Yeah,
and something that a lot of people feel really passionately about.
Absolutely.
And I always think, if my dad was still alive and still battling cancer and in those final stages of his life, I don't think he would have gone down that path. I think he would have chosen to just be cared for, through palliative care. But again, it's that choice. And I think that, for me, I feel very passionately about that. And I think that if you are a family that maybe has a loved one right now that is going through those final stages of life, you really, you'd be, it's such an important piece of legislation.
It could be an important piece of legislation if we get to it being a piece of legislation. But to get it to that stage, we need to go through this process. And I think given the seriousness of the issue, it's not unreasonable to take a couple more months to try and do this. And so I'm keen for Territorians to know that they should take heart in the process, that we're working together to try and get to a resolution.
Tanzil, something that the former Attorney General Chancey Paik said on the show this morning, throughout the week he said that really the government should have a draft exposure bill that they are going out and consulting people on, rather than just sort of going out with, he wasn't sure. Is it a set of questions? What exactly will you be going out with?
Well, the member for 𝙍𝙬𝙈𝙋𝙎 is entitled to his opinion, and I don't want to politicise the issue, but I'm simply going to say that the former government, Labor government, if they wanted to, could have also introduced a bill into the House, but they chose not to. Likewise, the government that I'm a part of has chosen not to do that. Now, why they've chosen not to make it their own issue is for them to determine, right? But the fact is no one has done it. So rather than looking backwards, I'm trying to look forward constructively now. That's really what we have to work with. I think, this has always been a matter of conscience, and it's a serious matter, voluntary assisted dying. And so, as I say, no political party, no individual has wanted to champion it in their own right. This offers us an opportunity to, in a bipartisan way, with a bipartisan committee, to put forward, instructions for legislation, which then the government will respond to in due course, I imagine.
Well, Tanzil Rahman, obviously the VAD Steering Committee Chair and member for Fong Lim, good to catch up with you this morning. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
2-8. Tanzil Rahman is the member for Fong Lim and chair of the Legal Constitutional Affairs Committee, is leading the new investigation into VAD in the Northern Territory. Tanzil, welcome to the studio. So let's start back at the beginning here. Before the country Liberals came into power last year, there was an independent report into voluntary assisted dying. It was handed down in the final days of the Labor government. Why wasn't that just accepted, carte blanche, rather than now a new investigation going on?
Well, morning, Adam. Top of the morning to you. First of all, I'm in no position to say why the former government did or didn't act on the expert report that was handed down in 2024. What I'm doing now is moving the agenda forward in partnership with a committee made up of members of the government, members of the opposition, members of the crossbenchers, and what we are seeking to do is bring resolution to this issue for Territorians.
We have 7 state and territory legislate on this issue. Obviously, the Northern Territory has some unique characteristics, but they were addressed in 1995. Why do we need another inquiry?
Well, again, the Legal and Constitutional Affairs Committee didn't ask for this inquiry, but we were asked to conduct this inquiry less than 2 months ago on the 14th of May. And what we are doing is proceeding in earnest at a pace and making good progress on that task. As to the people who chaired the former independent expert report, we've heard from them along with a number of others already to help guide our work, because what we're seeking to do is not reinvent the wheel here, but to do a final sweep of consultations and try and get us to a resolution on this issue as expeditiously as possible.
One of your terms of reference is to evaluate VAD models and safeguards. You've had a look at, obviously, the legislation that operates in the different jurisdictions, and they vary slightly around the place. Which is the ones that have attracted your most attention?
Look, we're not cherry-picking from one or any specific model. What we are doing at this stage is doing things sequentially. So the first task for us in our terms of reference was to put together a thorough consultation paper. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we received this inquiry on the 14th of May. Next Monday, the 14th of July, in only 2 months, and having also navigated budget estimates, the May budget sittings, a bunch of festivals and all the other things that happen during the dry seasons, we will be releasing our consultation paper. So on Monday, all Territorians will be able to download a copy of the consultation paper, which is a exhaustive 50-page document which goes through all the key issues to help us get to resolution.
What about the risk? We see it often in the Northern Territory where you have loud minorities can then sway the outcome of events. Regularly, I see this happen. Is there a risk by releasing a 50-page consultation document that those that are feverishly against VAD will become the loud voice there?
Well, not if you're careful about how you design a research project and then also conduct an inquiry. We're not trying to replace everything that's been done for 30 years. What we're doing, as I said, is putting all the key issues on the table and inviting on Monday 250 organisations to make a submission, a written submission to the inquiry, as well as all Territorians. And they can do that by sending in a written submission or calling the VAD hotline and giving us verbal testimony, as well as during August, when the committee will be going to, at this stage, 12 locations around the Northern Territory to hear from testimony on the ground from Territorians.
The Chief Minister was a little critical of the former independent report into VAD, saying it only spoke to people who were basically living on either side of the Stewart Highway in the centre of the Northern Territory. Did you agree with that when you had a look at the previous report?
Oh, not entirely. I think that the Chief Minister wasn't entirely wrong in the sense that there was a concentration of testimony gathered in some urban centres. But having said that, there was consultation done out previously in remote Indigenous communities as well, and it was an exhaustive piece of work. And nobody on our committee has, any axe to grind with the former report. What we've been asked to do is to evaluate and progress the issue, because what the former report wasn't tasked with doing was getting us to a bill. And that's what we're seeking to do. So when we're talking about those areas that are off the spine, off the Stuart Highway, tentatively at this stage, we are looking in August to be in 𝙍𝙬𝙈𝙀𝙀, Alice Springs, Borroloola, Darwin, 𝙍𝙬𝙀𝙀, Manningrida, 𝙍𝙀𝙀, Papunya, Santa Teresa, Warramayunga, Tennant Creek, a couple of other places as well. But all of that is subject, of course, to individual communities wanting us to come and consult with them and being available, and of course subject to resources as well.
So that's the next point. So you'll put it out to consultation. What's the timeline from there?
The timeline is the same as it's always been. In our terms of reference, we were asked to respond back to the Attorney-General by the end of September, which we will do. What we have done to this stage is basically meet very frequently, get a consultation paper together, a short consultation guide, which will be translated and interpreted into a number of languages, will also be put together in the coming weeks and distributed widely across Aboriginal communities and culturally and linguistically diverse communities. And then from that point onwards, from August, the committee and I will essentially be on the road for the best part of August. We will come back and report to the House again at the start of September sittings.
Then what happens? Could a bill? I mean, you've got a large majority at the moment. A bill could be passed quite easily.
Well, this is the key difference that we need to make here. This is no longer the job of the government. Right now, this is the job of a bipartisan committee. Our job is to deliver on this inquiry, and when we deliver on this inquiry, the government will have to decide how it wants to proceed. What I would say is it's worth having a modicum of perspective on how long it takes to get VAD up and running. Every state and territory in Australia does now have a piece of legislation, but for example in the ACT, VAD isn't yet available. It will be available in practice at the end of this year, but it takes time even after you get a bill into the House to get it passed, to then get it implemented. The UK, for example, in the last couple of weeks passed a VAD law for the first time, or the first stage of it in the House of Commons. They estimate that they will have that in place in implementation phase in 2029. So Australian jurisdictions actually have been comparatively fast at dealing with this once they have a bill and pass a bill. My job is to make sure we conduct a thorough inquiry and get towards a bill if appropriate.
I know there are some people facing end of life who are listening to the program this morning. What do you say to them or their families about the fact that they don't have access to the same rights that almost every other Australian has at the moment?
They have my sympathy, of course, first and foremost, and all I can say sincerely is that myself and my committee are working collegiately and cooperatively to try and get this issue resolved for Territorians as fast as we possibly can.
Top of the morning to you, Tanzil.
Top of the morning to you, Adam. Thanks for having me.
There's Tanzil Rahman, who's a member of Fong and Chair of Legal and Constitutional Affairs Committee.
Now, joining me in the studio is the LCAC Chair, that is the Legal and Constitutional Affairs Committee Chair, Tanzil Rahman. Good morning to you, Tanzil.
Good morning, Katie. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good to have you in the studio. Now, Tanzil, submissions are currently being called for and have been for the last week or so. Do you know if you've received many at this stage?
Yes, Katie, they're coming in thick and fast. Territorians have wanted to have a say on this issue and have done so in the past and are exercising the opportunity to do so again. So we're getting lots of written submissions coming in and people are also calling into the hotline to be able to just verbally tell us what they want to tell us. And all of that forms part of the evidence base that will go forward with us towards a final report and hopefully some model legislation if appropriate.
And so will those submissions be published, those written submissions, and also the people verbally calling?
That's a decision for the committee, and in actual fact, that's a decision we'll be taking at tomorrow morning's committee meeting at 10 a.m. So one of the things on the agenda is confirming that the submissions that come through will, by default, all be public. If occasionally somebody writes into us saying that I don't want this to go public, then that's a thing we consider separately, and then we determine whether or not it should go public or not. But in the ordinary course of events, all the submissions that come through to the inquiry will be public and available online.
And so another meeting happening tomorrow morning. What What else is going to be on the agenda for that one?
Well, tomorrow morning's big agenda item is essentially appointing a specialist legal advisor to help us on the journey, because what we're trying to do here, as I've said before, is not reinvent the wheel, but progress the agenda. And so what we really need in that regard is somebody to help us to get from all of Territorians' thoughts to something that is legally sound. And so tomorrow we'll be looking at some excellent candidates who are going to be helping us on the journey legally.
Okay, so by tomorrow afternoon we should know who that person is going to be?
By tomorrow morning we'll have made that decision, and a couple of days later we will, again on next Monday the 28th, have another meeting, at which point we will hopefully confirm and codify those meeting minutes. And so once that happens Monday week, I will be in a position to be able to make those announcements publicly.
That'll be good. It'll be good to find out exactly who that person's going to be. Now, Tanzil, tell me, I mean, you've just touched on then further meetings taking place tomorrow, as soon as tomorrow, but have further meetings and consultations taken place, with the community as well?
Not specifically with the community directly yet, because it's been about getting all our ducks in a row, as I pointed out before. So we've had a range of meetings. We last met when was it on the... Well, I'm forgetting anyway, but the bottom line is we're about to meet again tomorrow and again on Monday before the week of parliamentary sittings. At the parliamentary sittings coming up, the committee will also table an interim report to the parliament so that all members as well as the public are aware of where we're up to. But what we're essentially doing now in tomorrow's meeting and on Monday's meeting is finalising our public hearing schedule for remote engagement throughout the month of August.
Okay, so throughout August is essentially when those public consultations will happen.
That's correct, yep.
Do you have a fair idea yet of where they'll be, like if you're going out to specific communities and that kind of thing?
We have a working list of places that we're looking to go to, but it's very much contingent on community willingness, their availability, their interest, and some resource constraints as well. But at the moment, we're tentatively throughout August going to be in about 12 different places, including, non-exhaustively, 𝙑𝙬𝙀𝙀, Alice Springs, Borroloola, Maningarita, 𝙍𝙀𝙇𝙀𝙑, Papunya, Santa Teresa, Tennant Creek, Warramayunga. There are a few others as well. And again, that is a tentative list, I should be clear, because what we're trying to do is not go out unannounced or uninvited. We've been going through a careful process of letting all the stakeholders out there know we'd like your thoughts on this issue. Would we be welcome to come and have a conversation with you? And it may be the case that some communities would prefer we didn't. But those that do want us to come out, we will certainly make our best effort and endeavour to get out to.
But so you're hoping to visit 12 different communities in August alone. That's a lot. Do you feel like you'll be able to sort of do the thorough consultation that's required?
Absolutely. I mean, the whole point here is that the committee is working really well across party lines to resolve this issue for the Northern Territory. And that means that we have to be pragmatic about working within our time and resource constraints. And so, look, there are only so many places you can get in the working days in August. But pretty much throughout the month of August, every Tuesday morning, we as a committee will be heading out to a community and sort of coming back at the end of the week. And we've all committed to investing that time because we all believe this is an important issue that Territorians want us to get on top of.
Tanzil, it's quite a tight turnaround for the committee, I should say, in terms of reporting back to the government. I mean, are you confident that you're going to be able to really do the thorough consultation and then, get something back that will hopefully mean that at some stage we're going to go to a vote, or that this actually really genuinely does progress for Territorians?
Yeah, I'm quietly confident about that, Katie. And the reason is, as I say, because we are a committee of 5 now that are working together for the betterment of Territorians on this issue. We know that there is limited time. Nobody wants us to be doing an inquiry for the next 3 years. Nobody also wants us to be doing a nonsense inquiry for 3 minutes. We found a happy middle ground where we're doing the best we can to gather some supplementary data and information to add to everything that we already have over many years, which also includes, of course, the independent expert panel report from last year, which is very much the basis of our inquiry. We were asked to essentially look into that, look into the model that they were suggesting, go out and do some extra remote consultation, think about specific challenges for the NT, and then, if appropriate, move towards a solution, right? Some drafting instructions, a model bill. Now, to do those kind of things, what we need to do is juggle parallel processes. And that's why I'm on here talking to you about this today rather than at the end of when everything is fixed up. That's why I'm lodging interim reports to the Parliament as we go so that people have an idea of what we're doing. And I'm absolutely confident that we will be able to report back to the Attorney General in the House in September, and we will simply see where we're at that point. But, this is an issue that takes time to implement in the real world. And so it's going to take a little bit of time after a report is generated, a model bill is before the House. But I'm confident that the government wants to move forward with this issue, and that's why they've asked us to do this work.
Tanzil, it's a tough issue, right? Like you
Absolutely.
and I have spoken about this before, but politically it's a tough one as well, in the sense that there's going to be people from, there's going to be independents, there's going to be members of parliament, there's going to be members of the opposition that all sort of disagree to different elements. Like, are you confident that the work that you and the remainder of the committee are doing is actually going to get us to a point where we can finally introduce voluntary assisted dying in the Northern Territory?
Well, my commitment to Territorians is this. I will engage in a thorough inquiry. I will produce a thorough report. We will, if appropriate, produce model provisions for a bill. And at that point, it's up to the government to decide how they want to proceed. The government, though, has made clear that if we get to that point, there will be a conscience vote on this matter. So at that point, it doesn't become a matter of what party you belong to. It becomes a matter for each individual member of parliament to think about where they sit on the issue and how they feel about a model bill, how their community feels about it, how their constituency feels about it. So, for example, I will be engaging in a broad survey of all of the members of Fong Lim over the month of August and September, asking my constituents, how do you feel about issues around voluntary assisted dying, so that if we get to a point where we need to talk about a bill, I'll be armed with the information to be able to say, well, my constituents feel this way, and I'll know how I feel about it, and on the balance of that, be able to make a sensible decision.
Well, and that's exactly, I think, what people expect their local member to do is, engage with them to get a fair understanding of how they feel, and that's exactly what our local members are elected to do. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, well, look, I really appreciate your time this morning, and I look forward to receiving those updates. Tanzil Rahman, the member for Fong Lim and also the chair of the Legal and Constitutional Affairs Committee, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me again, Katie.
Thank you.